Well, welcome back to the Anti-War Room. Once again, Tom Andrews here, the National Director of the Win Without War Coalition. And with me again is Erik of the Institute for Policy Studies. Erik, welcome back.
Thank you.
This is Congress's last week before a 2-week break here as we begin this beginning of the end, really, for this week of Congress. A lot of activity going on this week and a lot of activity going on next week, which marks the 5th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, both here and in Washington and across the country. And I think probably the most important message to people watching this particular segment is that next week, the week of the 17th, and the following week, the week after that, are two very important opportunities for people to talk to their members of Congress at home about stopping the war in Iraq. And the way they can stop it, of course, is using the power of the purse and denying the president the money he wants in the supplemental appropriation that he's about to request. So if we say anything, perhaps, in this particular segment before Congress goes home, that's probably the most important, don't you think?
I think it's critical right now. All these members, at least certainly in the House, a third of the Senate, are going to be up for re-election. They're going to have this time period where they're home, then another month later on in the summer. But getting the word out now is more important than in the summer because they're going to be coming up with a debate on the spending bill before too long, and they need to be reminded that Iraq is going to be a central issue this year. As the economy has sort of dominated the agenda, a lot of members have tended to sort of not discuss the Iraq question. In fact, White House Press Secretary Dana Perero, in a press conference this week, got barraged with questions, and she said, "Well, it's been months since I've had this many Iraq questions," and I think that that's indicative of where the country is right now, and people need to put that this important issue back on the agenda.
And of course, once again, the violence in Iraq is again beginning to spike, despite the fact that billions of dollars is being spent, given to Sunnis and the so-called awakening groups around the country. The very people that were fighting the Americans now taking money for the Americans and basically regrouping, rearming, and many say just getting ready for the next wave of violence, and this could very well be that next wave of violence. Meanwhile, there has been absolutely no progress whatsoever when it comes to political reconciliation, and of course the whole point of the surge was to create the political space so that reconciliation could occur. So at this 5th anniversary, we find ourselves even in worse shape than we've ever been, and farther away from any political reconciliation in Iraq.
That's exactly correct. When you start looking at the numbers from December to now, that the violence levels have really flatlined. So where that they did have an opportunity to come down from the high point in early '07, that we haven't seen any progress on taking it down a step further. And as you mentioned, and a lot of people have been saying that that there isn't any space for the political reconciliation, and since we're arming now all the different factions, that it actually makes a political reconciliation even more difficult.
And they've been saying, hey, look, the violence is down considerably from last year. Well, think about it. Last year, it was just cataclysmic. That's like saying that, being in a Category 3 hurricane and saying it's a wonderful day today because it's not a Category 5 hurricane like it was last year. So things are bad, they're getting worse, and Congress is going to be home, so it's so important. There's a lot of buzz going on here in Washington right now, Erik, because, of course, just this past week there was a special election to replace the former Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, in Illinois. This contest was in a heavily Republican district, and it pitted a Democrat that was very critical of the war, built his campaign. In fact, it was the first political ad in the United States denouncing a permanent military presence in Iraq, very polarized positions on the war. The Democrat, with that strong position, defeated the Republican 52-48 in a Republican district, and boy, I'll tell you, that has a lot of concern being generated among members of Congress who support the war.
I think that's exactly why it's so critical that people in the next couple of weeks actually get in touch with their members and bring this fact up. Again, reminding them that the war is critical and that voters are ready to go out in numbers to support the anti-war candidates.
And remember, even those Americans, polls are telling us now, that believe that the surge is working, quote unquote, or showing some signs of progress, quote unquote, still are against the war, still think that the troops should go home, still believe that notwithstanding any progress in the surge, the United States should be pulling out.
Exactly.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about, Eric, about a story that's in the Washington Post this morning. It talks about the resignation of Navy Admiral William Fallon. It says Fallon had made several comments reflecting disagreement with the administration's stance on Iran, most recently in an Esquire magazine article last week that portrayed him as the only person who might stop Bush from going to war with Iran. What do you make of this resignation, and should we be worried?
You know, frankly, I was a little worried when Fallon came into the position. You know, here we had a Navy admiral, you know, coming into, which was very unusual in that area of the world. So many people at that point were still supporting the notion that you could surgically strike Iran and come out a winner, which I still don't understand how people think that. But if you were going to conduct those sort of operations, you would probably be doing them from naval vessels. But it turned out very early on that, you know, Fallon had challenged both the commanders inside of Iraq on troop levels, and he was also, you know, very steadfast against, you know, attacking Iran. And so seeing this pressure building on him, and finally with such a, you know, this happened so quick and suddenly, I don't think anybody had it on their radar screen that this might even be a possibility. And so it shows, I think, you know, that he was extremely fed up with the administration and just really, you know, going to put his whole career out to lunch for this.
Kind of reminds me of General Shinseki before the invasion, when he told the Senate that it was going to take hundreds of thousands of troops to stabilize Iraq after the invasion, and enormous amounts of money. And of course, he was given his walking papers as well. Let's talk, Eric, in the few minutes we have remaining, about what's going on next week. We're marking this very dark anniversary, the 5th year of the invasion of Iraq. Activities really actually start this week with Winter Soldier. Tell us about that.
Well, tomorrow there starts 3 days of hearings by members of the Iraq Veterans Against the War, IVAW, and they're talking about their experiences on the ground, what they saw, what they did. And this harkens back to the Winter Soldier hearings during the Vietnam War, which really for the first time gave Americans the sense of what was being done on the ground in their name, what we were really asking these soldiers to do for us and for our country. And I think over the next 3 days, these are going to be webcast live, that people will get a real sense of the horrors that are happening, you know, not just on the Iraqi side, but what's happening to our soldiers as well.
There are a lot of activities happening around the country. Several of our members, Win Without War member organizations, are participating in or leading various activities. MoveOn.org is one of them. Sojourners is another one. We also know one of our sister organizations, UFPJ, United for Peace and Justice, will be having activities marking this very, very dark anniversary here in Washington, D.C. It's a real reflective time for people. Also, the Win Without War Coalition next week will be launching at the Take Back America conference in Washington, D.C., and you can check that out on their website. We're going to be talking about a campaign to really put pressure on Congress to stop funding the war. You know, there was some debate within some circles of the so-called anti-war community that said, look, we don't have the votes. Let's not beat a dead horse. Let's not go ahead and drag us into this debate again, since we're not going to prevail anyway on this vote. Let's not do it. We feel very strongly that it's important to hold these members accountable, to have a national debate, to put the spotlight on members of Congress, and put as much pressure on them as possible to stop funding this war and only fund the amount of money necessary to get these soldiers out of Iraq as safely as humanly possible. So there's a lot going on.
No, I think the letter is a great start, and hopefully, you know, people will be able to take that into members' offices when they start doing their visits. next week and really remind Congress that it's not one more day, not one more dollar.
So check out the website, the Win Without War website. In fact, right here, we'll give you the open letter that we're going to be sending as a coalition to Jack Murtha, the chairman of the Defense Subcommittee on Appropriations, about this very fact, and more information about all the activities going on with all member organizations and allied organizations marking this 5th anniversary of the war. Make sure that you contact a member of Congress during the next 2 weeks, and we'll see you back here again next week. Erik, thanks so much.
Thank you.